Podcast guests are real people just like you and me. I used to think otherwise when I just listened to podcasts, but after interviewing and producing hundreds of shows, I now know better. On the Fallible Man podcast, they're men and women that are on a similar journey to you who have figured out something worth sharing and found a platform to share it on to help make people's lives better. I invite you to come meet the guests behind the show on these Get to Know You clips. I'm excited to have Bruce Chamoff. I told you I'll blow this over. I'm excited to have Bruce on the show, the CEO and founder of the World Podcast Network. I believe it's the largest private podcast network in the world. And this has been a long time coming. I met Bruce years ago when I got signed up for his network. I got my show listed on, at the time, it was the New York Podcast Network, I believe.
That's right. Yeah.
In the very early days of my show, it was the first attempt at any kind of marketing I ever did for the show. And Bruce and I have emailed back and forth many times over the years, and got it back and forth a couple times, but this has been a long time coming, having you on the show. Now, Bruce, I got a couple important questions to give us some context just about who you are for our listeners before we deep dive into this category one premise idea. In your own words today, who is Bruce Chamoff?
Bruce Chamoff is an out-of-the-box thinker who loves to be creative and build things or create things. He's never satisfied with standing still. And he just loves to travel, do public speaking, and anything that gets him in the spotlight. And that's the most broadest answer I can give.
You know what? I like it, though. It's actually very well thought out. A lot of people struggle with that question, including myself. So I've had that turn back at me a few times and be like, oh.
Well, nobody likes to talk about themselves, but I feel that if somebody's asking you about who you are, then that's it. You got asked. It's not like you're in a conversation with somebody you just met and you're just bragging about yourself. They're asking you. And when somebody asks you, the door is open for you to talk about yourself. That's how I look at it. But if nobody asks me, I won't say a word about myself. Now, I'll give you a very good example. I do a lot of business networking, and this is for anybody who's listening. When you go to a business networking event, I'm going to give a piece of advice that probably a lot of people are not going to agree with. But if you're going to a business networking group for the very first time and nobody knows who you are, you're that new person in the room, you're that new face that nobody's familiar with, but all the other people have been going for years and they all know each other. Don't bring any business cards. Okay? That is probably a piece of advice that I'm sure a lot of people's mouths are dropping open. Because when you go to a business networking event, the first thing you think of taking are your business cards. But here's why I say this. Because you're the new person in the room. Technically, nobody even knows who you are. They might be curious, but I feel that until you establish familiarity, if you say that word, it's best for you to ask for everybody else's business card. And then maybe the second meeting or the third meeting, take your business cards. And I felt that way because I was at a networking event that I actually knew all the people. And this one woman walks in and know what she did? She said, here's my business card. Here's my business card. Here's my business card. And she walked away. Didn't even ask us about who we were. Didn't even ask for a business card. And to me, that was the most unprofessional thing. So it just dawned on me. If you're the new kid on the block, then make friends. Don't intimidate people. So yeah, I have no problem with that question. Who is Bruce?
I love it. for clarity for people, what do you do for a living?
So by trade, I'm a web developer, and I've been doing that for 29 years. I've built over 1,000 websites when I was self-employed with a company called Hot Web Ideas that I really have made inactive because the World Podcast Network has taken on a life of its own. And I've managed web teams for the NBA, the Radio City Rockettes, and even National Enquirer.
Wow.
So, yeah, I've had a big career in web development and management.
That's amazing. What is
Yeah,
a
thanks.
podcast network for anyone listening who doesn't, right? Because we're not necessarily talking to a bunch of podcasters here. So for those of us outside of this world, what is a podcast network?
A podcast network can be thought of as a podcast directory or even a catalog, but that's not really a big term. It's basically a directory of podcasts. At its probably its base, its lowest definition, but a podcast network can offer a lot more than that, as you know, Brent, because you're on the network. You see what we do. There might be a guest exchange. So for people who want to get onto podcasts, they can join a guest exchange that is built by the podcast network. And the way we do is we integrate both at the same time. It might offer monetization opportunities, inserting ads into your podcast, which we do, and other types of marketing. Remember that the podcast network is doing its own marketing and getting people to come. So what they do is they try to also market the shows on their network so they can offer them to the visitors. And that's kind of what I guess the main service of the podcast network is, to market the podcast more than what they're doing already.
Okay. Now, Bruce, I still like to have a little bit of fun. So how's your trivia?
It depends on the subject.
Now, in all fairness, I do actually aim to try and find things that I think might actually stop people. So we'll see. Okay, so here's the trivia question of the show. When were the Guy Fawkes and the gunpowder plot discovered? Was it 1505, 1605, 1705, or 1805?
Oh, I have no idea. All I can do is say 1605. I can guess.
Hey, a guess is still something, right? Now you guys know the rules. Don't cheat. Don't look it up. Make your guess. Come back later. Bruce, are you ready for
I'll
the
come back. I'm going to Google that. No, just kidding.
You ready for the speed round?
Yep.
Here we go. Favorite childhood memory?
Meeting actually going to Florida, going to Miami, and on a plane.
Okay. If you could be in any movie, what would it be?
That one froze me a little bit. Probably. Wow, that's a really loaded question. And I watch a lot of movies. I would probably have to say The Wraith with Charlie Sheen. Okay. Because that dude is the dude he plays, that guy from space. I would love to be him.
Interesting. What was your favorite subject in school?
Math.
Math?
Yep.
What is it about computer guys and math?
I don't know. I don't make a correlation, to be honest. I don't think computer programming has anything to do with numbers, unless you're building like an accounting program.
Well, I don't think it does either, but that's why I'm confused. Like, I know a lot of IT is my background, so it's like
funny.
There's a lot of IT guys who just love math. I don't know why.
Yeah.
IT, super broad term, but you know what I mean.
I'm just good at math, I just think it's cool.
Now I got to convince my daughter to be good at math. She just does not like math.
Yeah, my daughter too.
I'm not the only one. Best slasher movie villain?
Freddy Krueger.
Freddy Krueger? Okay. I love, you can tell how old people are, what generation they came out of, by what.
Yeah, by what they. That's
right?
Funny.
What purchase of $100 or less have you made in the last year that's had the biggest impact in your life?
My recording equipment. I actually bought for my guitar. I bought a device like a distortion box.
Okay, nice. Is it like a single distortion or multi-range? I don't know a whole lot about it, but I know they.
No, it was a Boss. Boss is probably like the most popular brand, and I'm recording a little bit heavier guitar these days. So I need a more like a metal sound. And they have something called the Metal Zone. It was like $92. So yeah, it was right there by like around 100.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
I knew you were a musician, so I was hoping for a musical answer in there.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. I played an instrument. I played a saxophone when I was younger, but it's one of those that, you know, you stop paying for that thing when you get out of band, because the sax I played was like $8,000. I played the big Barry sax, and my parents
8,000. Wow. I was gonna say it's like the Summer Mark VI, which is the most popular sax in the world. So I was like, wow.
Baritone sax with the loop in the neck. And
I know.
A new one starts out between 6 and 8, depending on the brand and the model.
Yep. I play saxophone too.
Yeah.
And I just sold my tenor a couple of years ago. I still have my alto.
It's one of those things I wish I held on to, but my parents rented it because we, you know, couldn't afford an $8,000 sax at the time. So
no, it's crazy. Yeah.
It's nuts. My wife plays piano, so at least we got some music.
Oh, wow. That's great. Yeah.
Never had that patience.
Do your kids play any musical instruments?
Not yet. We're working on getting started. My wife is starting to work on some piano with them. I have some friends at church who do music on the side. I know like 3 guys who all play drums, guitar, and piano. Like,
there you go.
Okay, so they'll be coming over to visit you guys. I used
to give piano lessons too to kids and adults. Yeah.
That's awesome. You're very musically talented.
Thanks.
The work and dedication that takes is incredible.
Oh yeah.
If you had to write a book tomorrow, what would you write about?
Definitely how to be an out-of-the-box thinker.
Now you've committed. We're going to wait for that one to come out.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
I started writing a book 10 years ago on running a successful web development firm, but then things changed in technology. And at around chapter 14, I abandoned the book. You think I would finish it, but if I came out with that book today, it probably wouldn't sell or even do well because it's so out of date. And for me to go back and change what I've written is probably not going to work. So what I do instead is just write a lot of blog posts. Because when you're writing a blog post, your brain is right there in the here and now. Whatever currently is going on, you're not going to blog about something unless you have like, some kind of like, 50s or 60s type of blog. You're not going to blog about anything from the past. Right. And so it's even better that way because now you always, you're publishing immediately what you're writing about, and you don't have to worry about waiting for the book to come out. So that's how I did it. So I almost came out with a book.
I'm glad I'm not the only one. I got about 100 pages in. That was the whole start of my podcast. And I started the podcast for an audience to release a book, and then I stopped writing the book because I like listening better.
There you go. Yeah, you got to do what you got to do. No, definitely. If I was to write a book, it would be about thinking out of the box, how to take your vision and start implementing it. Not worry about that you don't have the resources or you're going to do it someday, because someday always means never in my vocabulary. I'm going to do it someday. Okay, well, when is someday going to come? Right? Either do it now or never do it. That's how I look at it. And stop making excuses. You can do whatever you want to do right now. The only limitation you have is your own motivation, your own mind. And I could probably write about 25 chapters just on that.
Oh, I'm sure. Best playground insult.
Oh my! Wow. Well, I'm 5'2", and so I always used to get the short jokes. And we're talking about how tall I was in elementary school when we went to the playground every single day during recess. And I don't know what my height was. I was like, 3 feet something back then. And yeah, I used to get that one all the time. Hey, you're short. Hey, you're a midget. Hey, you're this. Hey, you're that. So.
What's your best dad joke?
My best what joke?
Your best dad joke.
Dad joke. I have a lot of them, but can't think of anything. I got to think about that one.
Okay. Fair enough. Batman or Superman?
Batman.
Now, you write and produce music yourself. We touched on it a minute ago. You produce other musicians. Tell us a little about that.
I just love the creative process. I mean, podcasting is a small part of what musical producers do, right? Podcasters, to put this into perspective, because we're on the podcast, is usually talk, dialogue, conversation, and you're the host, you have a guest, you're trying to get the sound levels correct, and you want to make sure that you sound like you're both in the same room. And I hear that a lot of podcasts don't do that. Usually the guest is like this far away, and the guest themselves does not have a microphone. But when you're producing music, it's a lot more involved, because you have a mix that's involved. You have to make sure that all of the instruments don't drown out each other. You have to take into effect the stereo. Nobody thinks about stereo when they're doing a podcast, right? But you always think about stereo when you're doing music. Where are the instruments? Are they left? Are they right? Are they center? Do they, like I said, do they not drown out each other? Because every single time you add a new instrument, a new track, it drowns out something else, right? So I love that process. And I have a lot of people that come to me saying, look, I'm a great songwriter, but I don't know how to make my music. I know how to write it, but I don't know how to turn it into a song. And that's where I come in, and I'm not, by any education, I am not a music engineer. I'm not a recording engineer, but I learned, and I love the process of mixing artists, of producing their music, of mastering it. And back in the 90s, when I was recording my music, when we didn't have the internet, we didn't have home studios, I would pay about $60 to $75 an hour watching this guy fiddle knobs, okay, just sliders up and down, turning knobs, moving the sliders, and putting a microphone in front of me. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't need this guy. All I need is the $10,000 to buy that 64-track mixing console. And now you don't even need that. So it's great. I learned by watching all these engineers. So it's fun.
I always laugh. I've been doing, I started doing audio visual stuff when I was 11, because my dad was a preacher, and we were small. There was no one to do sound for, and I was always worried about his voice, because I knew a man named Keith Lancaster. He founded the group Acapella years ago, and he had to stop singing for years because he developed vocal nodes, because he floored it too hard without a mic too often on different venues when they didn't have support for him. And it almost cost him. Like, he had to stop singing for, I think, 6 or 8 years, and just produce other groups. So I was really obsessive about it. So I started learning this stuff.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I have a 8-track mixer over here on the left. It's off screen.
Oh, that's cool.
Because I still run everything through. I still like to have the manual faders where I can tweak things and adjust things.
So you get it. Yeah. No, you understand.
Yeah, we have an incredible system in our church. The guy who put it in is a professional sound engineer. Like, he used to work in the movie industry and stuff. And so we have a ridiculous sound system at church that no one will touch other than me and him.
That's great.
You were talking about mixing and getting it. I mix our worship team all the time, and it's like,
that's cool.
I love. And there's something so satisfying about getting that, watching it come together in the right layers and the right balance, and just that full, beautiful sound.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work. I mean, the one thing that podcasters don't do, and I'm thinking of actually doing a podcast episode of this on my own, and I could probably have you also, Brent, on my show, talk about this. But what a lot of music producers use is the compressor. And basically, the compressor it lowers the high volume and it raises the low volume, so everything sounds more even in volume. And you hear a lot of podcasts where you got two hosts, you got a guest, and everybody has their own volume. And somewhere along the line, as a listener, I turn up to hear the guy in the back because you can't hear him. And then all of a sudden, the host, that's literally about 1 centimeter away from his microphone, comes on. And now you got to turn it down because he just blew out your ears.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it seems like you know what you're doing because you have the sound system in the church, you have your 8-track. I'm sure there's a compressor, but a lot of podcasters have to know how to use that when they're going to have multiple hosts and guests. That's kind of a no-brainer, but everybody thinks that you can just get the microphone and talk into it and have your guests and have your questions, but it's not quite as straightforward as that. It's easy, but it's not straightforward. So it seems like you get it.
I have a favorite plugin when I'm finishing my audio called Vocal Writer, where you can set the levels to keep it between a certain range, and it will scan the track in real time and ride the fader for you.
Oh, that's cool.
So it works
like an automation thing, right?
Yeah, it works a lot like compressor, only it's just old school manually doing it. Like I was actually sitting there on a fader dealing with it. It's a little less aggressive than compressor. I don't like to over compress sound.
Me neither.
We're going to nerd out on this, so I'll stop.
Hey, listen, we're talking about creativity, right?